Hi, this is Odeean here. Today I'm looking at Bandai's Soul of Chogokin GX-36 Ideon from the show Space Runaway Ideon. I've been watching a whole bunch of shows that go with my Soul of Chogokins lately, including God Mars, Space Emperor God Sigma, this Space Runaway Ideon, and I've got to tell you that Space Runaway Ideon is the best of the bunch that I've watched so far. It has a real plot, and I'm kind of anxious to see how it develops from episode to episode. It's not just one-offs where you only get a little bit of development. It's actually got a story which is sort of mysterious and progressing quite nicely. So if you like how this toy comes out in the review, you might want to check out on YouTube Space Runaway Ideon. If I can find a link, I'll stick one in the description just underneath this video. Without going into too much depth, because this is after all toy review, there are some humans on a kind of colony planet, and there's an excavation going on with some relics that are getting dug up when some aliens called the Buff Clan start to attack the humans. And some of the relics that they get are these these vehicles, which are from a lost civilization known as the Sixth Civilization, I think. And along with these comes a kind of ship that goes with them that they later call the Solo ship, and that makes the core mecha of the humans in the series. These vehicles, along with the other technology that the humans are using, seem more traditional, whereas the Buff Clan, who are essentially humans as well, just from somewhere else, although they refer to their planet as another Earth, so I'm not sure exactly what they're talking about. Their vehicles are really more spacey and futuristic and kind of less anthropomorphic in their designs, and really interesting to me. And I'm thinking of picking up some of the model kits because there's no other way to get those robots, but they are pretty awesome looking robots, so check them out. When you get these vehicles from Ideon in hand, the first thing that you're going to notice is there's an extreme amount of diecast in some of these, especially the piece that's in my hand now from the lower part that forms the lower part of Ideon, his legs. This is virtually a solid chunk of diecast, and it's quite heavy. It's perhaps, this whole package is perhaps one of the heaviest Soul of Chogokins. It's the heaviest one I own, I think, and this single piece is heavier than some whole other toys. I don't want to bang it like I was banging with God Mars, because this guy is more vulnerable to damage, just the amount of parts that touch on each other as the toy moves around, and that is a little bit of a worry. This vehicle here has diecast as well, mainly concentrated in the front section, this yellow part, so it's got a little bit of heft, but also a lot of plastic. And this guy here, I can feel the weight in it. It's quite heavy, but on the outside, none of the pieces that you can see here are die-cast, but internally there's some structure that holds it all together, which is also die-cast and quite heavy. The names on the box for the Soul of Chogokin refer to these as Mecha A, Mecha B, and Mecha C, but the way I hear the show, they refer to these guys as some other things, and there's special names for the different modes of operation. So the mode that you see in now, they're all in their land-based mode. But let's have a little look at each one individually to see exactly what they can do. So Mecha A here is kind of the hero ship, and even though each ship maintains some degree of control over the combined mode of Ideon, this guy forms the head and arms, so he's kind of the master controller. His pilot Cosmo is kind of the hero character, the young guy with the big hair, like a big afro. He is sort of the person in the show that the viewer is most supposed to identify with, I guess. Throughout the show, the humans are constantly loading Ideon and the individual vehicles up with missiles, and you can see these panels along the sides with the little bumps in them on the arms up here and the side over here. These are actually missiles that people have loaded up to shoot the buff clan with. I don't think they're actually part of the robot to start off with. They're more like an add-on that humans have stuck in here that wasn't included from the 6th civilization. There's more up here, and one of the problems that they get is that during transformation, different missiles become unusable because their position changes, and so I think that's one of the reasons why there are so many missiles in every spot, so that no matter what happens, they can always fire from somewhere. As far as design goes, I mean, they've done the best they can do, I suppose. These big bits just folding over here. It would have been cool if there was some kind of weaponry featured in here to make it look at least like they're supposed to be something, but as it is, they just seem like arms on top of a tank, which is really what it is. As I said, no diecast on the outside, but quite heavy. But one cool feature that I haven't seen anywhere else are these treads. So they're not just sculpted on. If you watch this, it's a working tread made of rubber. It's a little bit scary that in time, I'm guessing rubber has to crack, especially thin, flexible rubber like this. You can actually roll on them, although I don't like to do it much, and depends on the surface. But kind of cool, although I think I would have preferred sculpted detail, just because once this cracks, it's going to look pretty ugly. Each of the vehicles has a land-based mode, which is what you can see here, and a flight mode. So let's get this turned into the flight mode. To do that, we just need to bend these back a bit, rotate it so that the little tab here is on the outside for both arms. Now it's going to push in a bit like this, and then just kind of go off to the side. Do that on both. Push in, off to the side. On the underside, you'll see these little flaps. We want to open those and move out these engines. Just push them up. One of mine's a little bit loose. It might fall down. Not much I can do about that. Oh, wait a minute. This is probably the worst thing to do, is to untab this here. There's a nasty tab in the front that doesn't like to come out, and in the long run I think it's going to be disastrous for that tab, but this is pretty new, so no problem at the moment. We want to bend out this section, but it's not a straightforward pivot. You'll see that once it gets this far, it can't move anymore because it bumps the side. So you can see there's a little slot and pin in there. What we want to do once it gets to about 90 degrees is just push it in and then continue rotating it, and then push it to the side to get it back into that gap. Just like that. So doing the same thing for the other side. We're going to rotate it, push it down, continue rotating it, and then push it over to the side. You can see Ideon's head in there, but we're not going to be interested in that just yet. Close all this back up. It does kind of snap together at the front here. In the side of this unit, there's a little tab. We put our fingernail in there and pull out a wing. Pull out the wing on the other side. Do the same on the top for these little rudders. And that is our flight mode. There is a kind of charm to it. You'll see that's the floppy one there. Not much I can do about it. I think what I like best about it is that it's kind of not perfect, if you know what I mean. It's got a very kind of 70s look to it, which is really when it comes from. These days, when people make spaceships, they're more streamlined and more spaceshipy, if you know what I mean. They're more focused on the lines, whereas this guy just fits in whatever he can in order to get Ideon into these other two modes, and just something about the way that that's accomplished I quite like. The next we have Mecha B, and if you look around on this guy, you'll see that there are some missiles. We've got little missile arrays in the side here, a tiny little missile array in the side here, but far fewer than in Mecha A. So B is not bad. Now, he can transform as well, and to be honest, this mode, it kind of looks like a fire truck from the front, but it's a little bit bad looking from the back. It's a little bit of a mess. It's probably one of the weakest parts of the toy. So let's get this guy transformed into his more complicated form. To transform it, what we're going to do is grab this little panel here, just pry it up and flip it forward. Then these two side bits are going to fold out at 90 degrees. Extend the barrels of these little cannons. Fold up this thing, whatever that is. Now on the bottom here there's two little tractor treads, so we're going to pull those out, and that's it. Now admittedly it still looks like a mess. Nothing that you do to this is going to stop it from looking like a jumble of pieces, but at least in this mode we've got kind of these cool weapons. I do like just the bits jammed on everywhere, and it's detailed really nicely. You can see that in this thing, I don't know, it looks like some kind of communications device. It's got silver, orange, red, grey paint. That's a lot of detail for one tiny little piece. If you have a little look here closer up though, you can see that on the diecast section here, well, actually that's plastic, but the paintwork is rubbing itself off. If I can just focus on it. I've only opened this once, so just the pressure of its own transformation actually cuts through its own paint. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this toy has a tendency to rub on itself, so the less you actually do all these cool things, the better in the long run. Looking at that, you may be thinking, wait a minute, that's not a flight mode, but yes, underneath it is. These jets, which were there all along, are what it can take off with. So it just vertically lifts off like that, and then don't ask for an explanation how it flies in an atmosphere in this form, because it's not given. In space I can buy it, but there's many scenes in the show where this guy flies around in an atmosphere in this mode as a flying kind of fire truck, and it is a bit ridiculous, but if you watch the show you can go along with it, just because the rest of the story is kind of interesting, and little bits like that don't matter so much. The final Mecha C, is this guy, and as I said before, it weighs a ton, really heavy, and it suffers a lot from these bits sticking out the back. Ideon has a really unique design, and I like his design, especially in robot mode, but there doesn't seem to be any good reason for a truck to be driving around with these huge knife blades on the back. But you know, it's a Soul of Chogokin. Sometimes they don't have to make sense, they just have to look really, really pretty, and this guy does do that. He's got nice die-cast surfaces here, they feel fantastic. He is a bit loose, so some of the things that are used in transformation, like these bits here, don't sit very snugly, and if you just let go of it the wrong way, it can sit wrong. Now as far as missiles go, he has the most out of any of these vehicles. This long array of missiles, two arrays on each side, this side and the other side. None at the front, none at the front that I can see. At the back we have these big boosters which get used later in the flight mode. And these big round circles under here are the bottom of Ideon's feet, and I guess they can be used for directional thrust as well. Although he has tons of wheels with all this weird proportion and flexibility and weight, it really doesn't roll that well, and it doesn't sit that flat on the ground. Let's get Mecha C turned into flight mode. We're going to grab these wheels, which are on their own kind of pod, bring them out like this, and just flip them. It's a little bit tricky. There. flip them around, and they get nicely concealed like so. If I can just get it to sit flush like that. The next thing is to grab these little panels and open them up so that we can fold the front wheels away and hide them like so. Then what we want to do is separate these legs, and if you look, where is it? If you look on the inside, there's a little insert here and a little tab here. So we want to fold out this tab so it's sticking out like that. Get the two legs and rotate them towards each other, and then where that tab is, push it together and it will lock. If you do it just right, you can kind of lock it together. Once you're satisfied that it's aligned properly and not going to fall apart, we're going to bend this panel forward and pull out this nose cone section. And if we push it down far enough, it will just kind of loosely lock to where it's supposed to be. Then we can open up these wing panels to the side, and finally open up these little central tail panels, fingernails or something, and there we have the jet mode. It has got wings, but it's a little bit ungainly, a bit hard to use because it has a tendency to just fall apart because it's so heavy. But it does have a pointy end at the front, wings at the side, a tail, and rockets at the back. So it is at least some kind of jet, a little bit more like a flying machine than the last one. We still have access to our missile pods on the underside. Now let's get these guys combined and form Ideon. So just sort of fold these back up, untab the part that we put together, fold the little thing back in, bend these sections forward, and just making sure that they go into the gap. Pull this section right out like this. It's a bit scary because it's got a click and it feels like it could actually rip in half. Rotate this in this direction. Is that right? Other direction, like so. Then just bend forward this panel like this. Rotate the ball so you can see the Ide gauge on the front. Ide is the mystical energy that powers Ideon. And then you can just kind of position this to suit. So you can put it further down to look better, or kind of further up for more poseability. I generally prefer it further down. Grab Mecha B, basically undo everything that was done before. So fold all these little gizmos back in, put this flap around, fold these treads in, move these wheels just a little bit out of the way to give us clearance to bend these large flaps to the front, like this. This panel in the center can fold in on itself once, and then you'll see it's on a big track, which you can carefully contract all the way up like this so that the bit is sticking out of the back. Finally, you want to just bend these so that they're neatly stacked on the back end like this. That little thing can slide all the way in if you squeeze it, and that's that section. Grab Mecha A, undo what we did before, extend these arms out, put the flaps all back in, bend up these panels like this, rotate out the hands, close the panels again, separate all of this, being careful with that difficult tab in the middle, extend these rods so that it reaches the furthest distance like this, and you'll see that's Ideon's head right in the middle there. Next, we want to undo these, remembering that they don't rotate evenly, so what we have to do is slide it up like that before we can get it back in. So again, bend it down, slide it up, play with it until you get it just right, because you don't want to force it. If you force it, it's going to snap. essentially that's it. We can position the arms how we like by collapsing them in on themselves, just till you reach a good length. Now the combination. So we're going to get this, open up these little tabs at the side here because they're kind of a locking mechanism, and carefully insert this like so, and then shut that. That is locked in now. Next, grab this upper section and just lower it down like this and press it in. And that is that. It's pretty simple to join. Then you have the God Robot Ideon. You'll notice that in the little cavity up here where Ideon's head was during the transformation, it looks pretty ugly, but thankfully we have these two panels to fill that gap. So all we have to do is just insert them like so, and that looks much more attractive. Now you can do the transformations with those panels intact because they do fold out, but the vehicle modes will have a weird panel sticking out in the middle of nowhere that looks like it doesn't belong, and that's why they've also been made removable. Ideon is very tall. I think he's the tallest Soul of Chogokin. So if I get my ruler here, you can see that the top of his head is about 30 centimeters from the ground. And he's so tall, in fact, that this is the first SOC review I've had to do where my tripod is actually moved up a notch on its legs because I just couldn't fit this guy in the shot. For poseability, he's pretty good for an SOC. He's got a kind of bowl and swivel on the head. His antenna can go in and out, and I think the reason for that is to fit in the vehicle mode transformation, but I think I prefer them in anyway. I don't like them to be so long. We've got ratcheted joints which go the whole way around, but unfortunately it's a plastic ratchet. I don't know why they put a plastic ratchet on the shoulder of this guy when he's got so much die-cast in him, when other toys have die-cast ratchets. But anyway, it's a little bit weak. You can see that if it gets a bit of momentum, it'll fall down, but it is strong enough to hold a pose if you position it carefully. Now we've got a swivel at the elbow. We've got this weird little bit of in and out here, which is often seen in the show with that bit of a bend. I think they've done that for show accuracy, but we also have this major in and out, which is a byproduct of the transformation joint. The elbow is kind of double jointed, so you'll see he can get this big degree of motion, but it does force paint rubbage, which will wreck the toy, and it leaves this ugly gap if you don't put it back in after bending it. So you can get some good shots, but not on a continuous basis. You always have to stop and adjust it to make it look good when you've finished posing it. There's no waist swivel, but we do get a swivel at the thigh, in and out here, backwards and forwards, which has no ratchet, sadly, and for such a heavy figure it's quite a problem actually. Like if I sit him down, he wants to do this. I mean, he's not really doing it now, but over time he just slumps down, so it's a bit hard to show in the video, but there you go, he's doing it by himself now. But it's a little bit weak there. But what we do get also is the ability to bend this down like this so that it stands higher up, and with that higher up you get this really good range of motion at the hip, so he can form a sitting down pose like this. There's not many SOCs that can sit down. I'm not sure why there was a need for Ideon to sit down. I haven't seen him sitting down in the show. He does kind of land face down on the solo ship a few times in combat situations, but I've never seen him sitting down like he's playing on a mat. It's a little bit weird that they felt the need to do that. He does get a good range of motion backwards and forwards with that extended joint, but at the expense of looking ugly if he's standing up. So you have to adjust it again to look good when you're finished, like that. At the knee, we've got a very clicky ratchet, one of the only good ratchets in the toy, side to side, backwards and front, and a little bit of toe action on the foot. That's about it for poseability. The hands that Ideon comes with are flexible like this, so he can grab things and then close them, and they are perfectly fine. There's no need to ever take them off if you're happy with them, and it does give him a perfect transformation. But if you want other hands, he has these really nicely sculpted bigger hands. So here we've got extended finger hand. I don't know what that gesture symbolizes, so he's got one for each side of that. Next we have this closed fist. It's a really good fist. Quite happy with this fist actually, although I don't use it much, but it looks really nice. And finally we get this, probably the most useful one, this kind of grasping, reaching, grasping hand. It looks really good. The next thing Ideon comes with are these domes. So we get two of these, and I don't think this is actually in the show. It's more just like an artistic way to make a base for holding other pieces. So this clear rod can slot into it, and that just allows us to hold something. So if I move him back a little bit, stand up, heavy guy. Now we get this awesome thing. Now I'm not up to this part of the show, so I can't tell you exactly what this is, but it's obviously some kind of massive cannon. Maybe part of the solo ship pops out. Maybe they get a new spaceship. I don't really know what it is, but it's obviously a cannon. It's got a light up feature. I don't have a battery for it at the moment, but it looks very powerful and menacing. And these handle units sort of fold back like this for him to hold. On the underside, there's a hole here which one of these bases can slot into. So we can stand Ideon here, and using his grasping hands, the normal hands, grab a hold of it like this. That's pretty good. Now, I have seen in the show Ideon can generate a black hole, so he's got some kind of black hole weapon. It wasn't this ship, so unless there's something I'm missing, I've heard this referred to as black hole cannon, but when he used the black hole cannon earlier on, there was no thing that he was holding. So I'm not sure if that's the same weapon or a different weapon. As I said, I'm not up to the end of the show yet. Also in the set to go with this cannon are these pieces which I've already joined together, and I'm guessing it's to channel the power of the Ide out of Ideon into that cannon. So this can just kind of, how does this go on? Pull this one off and tab this on, and he's got like some power cables that can slot right into the side of these, like so, and this one into the other side, and there we go. Now Ideon can supply power to this cannon. We do get another little piece. So this is the piece that came off, and then we do get this other piece to replace it with, which is just black. I'm not sure what the significance of that is. The next weapons we get are these energy beam weapons like laser swords, and again I'm not up to this in the show, but apparently these are some kind of massively powerful beam that can cut through anything. Let's see if we can get these on. So the instructions say to put on this, we've got to pop off the regular hand and stick on punching fist, like so. And then there's a little cap that goes over the top of that. I'm not really sure how that's going to help. It doesn't seem to grab it very well, and I'm doing exactly what it shows. Maybe it's just meant to sit there, but anyway, we've got an attachment that can go onto this thing. It's like a little cup attachment for the top, and that can just take the weight of the beam. So off camera I've examined the instructions a little bit more clearly, and there apparently isn't any way to securely lock this on. It just has to sit there with the stand taking the bulk of the weight. So you can see you can get his hand with friction to hold on to one end and then the stand to hold on to the other end, but it's a pretty precarious situation and a little bit inadequate as far as I'm concerned. For such a big heavy weapon, there needs to be some way it can at least peg on so that it doesn't just fall down. Falling down like that, I don't like that. I think that it's just bound to break it in the long run. At this point with most SOCs, we're probably going to be getting to the end of the review, but not with Ideon. There are tons of little mecha that come with this. The Buff Clan is just loaded with ships and walkers and gizmos and stuff. So the first one of those is this little guy. It's just kind of a generic robot drone piloted thing. You can see two little Buff Clan soldiers sitting on the top. They walk this thing around and it shoots stuff. There are 10 of these included with Ideon. The next is this walker. So again, you can see a Buff Clan member piloting it up the top there. It's like a power suit. There are 2 of these included with the set. The guys run around in this, the aliens run around and jump all over the place, and this is basically their all-terrain vehicle that they get from point A to point B when they're not flying a spaceship. Next we get this spaceship, and it's used I think by one of the bad guys to rendezvous with Karala, which is one of the aliens which end up living with the humans, and it's really detailed quite finely. Red paint, black paint, multiple parts glued together. It's produced quite nicely. It's really nice. Next we've got this tank. I think this tank comes from a bunch of humans that are on a separate colony, if I remember correctly. So this might be a human mecha. We only get one of these, I think. Yeah, that's right, one. So I would have liked to have seen a couple more of these guys included. Next we've got this, and I think this is my favourite out of all the little ships. I think this is a human ship as well. Maybe the colony, as I mentioned before. Earth military, I don't know. It's really nice. Oh, look at that. What I would love to have a fleet of these. It's fantastic. Bandai, as I've said in my Godzilla reviews before with their little vehicles, they should sell these by the bucket load. People would buy them. I mean, you could charge $5 each for these and just sell them in huge fleets, and I'm sure there would be people who would buy stuff like this because they're really, really nice. Finally, we've got this Buff Clan fighter ship, and it carries this really heavy bomb on the front. You can see that missile looking section. It actually comes off. So if I just grab a hold of it, you can see it's a rocket, a huge bomb, which they just shoot into their enemies to kind of destroy them, and they offload these things onto the solo ship all the time to do damage. They're really destructive. It's kind of like a bee. They have to lose the sting part in order to fight. So my final thoughts on GX-36 Ideon. Is this going to be my favourite SOC? It very well could be. It comes very, very close. You can see all the little guys on here, they help a lot. As I've mentioned before, my current favourite SOC is God Mars. Now you can see that Ideon is a lot bigger than God Mars. He towers over him, so he's got that advantage. But where he lacks a little bit is in his ability to not fall over. So you can see I just did the same thing to both, and Ideon almost took a tumble. As far as price goes, comparing the two, I paid about $260 shipped for Ideon, I think, whereas this guy was much more. I want to like Ideon. I want to like Ideon the best because I love this show. God Mars' show is a pretty average kids show and not very entertaining after you've watched 10 or 15 episodes. I'm still dying to see what happens in Ideon. So the fiction is kind of dragging me in, and the fiction is what made me really pick Ideon and buy him ahead of some other things that I was considering. It is a satisfying SOC. It does have some of the qualities that we like, but also a little bit of floppiness which we don't like. And it's that floppiness which makes it less fun to play with. God Sigma, God Mars, by Kanfu, who I've shown all these guys, you can stick them in a place and they will probably still be in that place when you come back. Not Ideon. When I walk away from this guy, I have to make sure that he's securely sitting down or leaning on something, because with the huge weight and his tendency to fall over, I really feel like he'll just fall over and smash. So he looks good, and he's got a lot of features for play value, and the little guys help you to take some nice photos. A lot going in his favour, but he doesn't take the crown. His faults kind of weigh a little bit too heavily on him. I definitely think he's good, and as far as recommending Ideon goes, I can recommend it. So there's a wide spectrum of prices. If you look at somewhere like eBay, when I picked it up, as I said, it was about $260. All the sellers at that price seem to have jumped to about $300 since that time, but he goes for as high as $800. It just depends where you're getting it from. I've seen that Japanese sales for this guy are much more expensive. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because it's individuals instead of companies selling it, but I would never pay more than, say, $350, and I'd be even reluctant to do that. But anything under $300 is probably a pretty good deal, and I could recommend it at that price. If it's not the love of the character that's drawn you to look at this video, if you're just mainly looking at it primarily because you're an SOC collector, I think this is kind of one of those essential parts of an SOC collection. So if that's the driving motivation for you, then I think definitely it's worth picking up, because he's kind of striking, and he's the biggest, and he's got a ton of diecast, so he really is kind of a perfect example of that line. Anyway, that's about it. That's my video review for GX-36 Ideon. I'm odeean, and thanks for watching.